you ever had one of those moments where you've been talking to a friend or a family member or a coworker, and they've made some offhand comment about being a stepmom, and you know that they didn't intend to offend you, but the comment really made you cringe, and then later on you kicked yourself for not really knowing what to say or having a good response? Well, get ready. We're going to tackle some of those awkward moments today, and I'm going to make sure that you are armed with the perfect response the next time it happens. I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, step-family life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this. Hey there. Today we're talking all about the awkward moments when you are faced with someone who's just said something really cringe-worthy about stepmomming. I'm not talking about a child who screams, "You're not my mom." I'm not talking about a biological mom who makes a nasty comment or says something behind your back. Trust me, those things happen, and I think they happen probably more often than we would like, right? What I'm talking about today are the things that are said without intending to be hurtful. The things that are said because maybe whoever's saying them just doesn't realize how it's coming out or how it's coming across. And chances are, most of the people who've made these comments are a family member or a close friend who's trying to be supportive. Most of the time, they think they're helping you, and they would probably be surprised to know that what they've said has just destroyed you or even just hurt your feelings. And I'll be honest, this kind of stuff did not occur to me until I became a stepmom. I'd like to think that I was perfectly supportive of my stepmom friends before I got married and became a stepmom myself. But I'm pretty sure that I have said some of these things without knowing or realizing that what I was saying wasn't super supportive or helpful. And I know the standards for stepmoms are already really high, weirdly high, right? We are expected to handle everything with grace, including nasty comments. And we try. I know we really do. I know that I try, and I'm sure that you try. But it can be really hard when someone we love and rely on makes a truly boneheaded remark. We expect it from perhaps our partner's ex. Sometimes we even expect it from our stepkids because, it happens. We don't expect it from people that we love and people who we rely on. So the question becomes, how do we respond to those comments without getting fired up or putting them on the defensive because they aren't aware that they've done anything that could hurt your feelings? It's especially hard when we know that they have the best of intentions and that they want the best for you and that they just don't really understand the meaning behind their words. So let's jump in and get started. The first comment I want to talk about is, you knew what you were getting into. What did you expect? This one makes me crazy. Do stepmoms know they're getting a man with kids? Absolutely. Do they think they have an idea of how that's going to play out? Maybe, yeah, probably. I thought I had an idea of how it was going to play out. But the reality is, we most likely had no clue, right? That was my reality. Did you expect all the crazy that can come with being a stepmom? The loneliness, the conflict, having a hard time bonding with kids or dealing with the ex, the lack of control over your own life, having another woman control your schedule. Or how about the co-parenting challenges? Or in high conflict situations when you're sabotaged by the other household. We've got an episode coming up where we're going to go deep on how to deal with stepmom reality not lining up with your expectations. And I think you'll really enjoy it. But suffice to say, there is no way anyone could expect all the dynamics that come along with step-parenting. I know I didn't, and I'm pretty sure you didn't either. It doesn't make it any less worth doing. At least for me, the good has always outweighed the bad, even on the days that have felt like the worst. But there is no way I could have known what it was going to be like when I got married. So when someone says that, you could perhaps respond with humor and say, well, does anyone really know what they're getting into when they get married? Or you could respond with something like, well, it's really impossible to anticipate everything that's going to happen when you're a stepmom, but I think we've all done our best. And for your friends and family who might be listening, I'm going to talk to you and say, maybe instead of saying that, try saying something a little more supportive, like, this sounds more complicated than you thought it would be. I am here for you. Because what your stepmom friend really needs is your support and statements that will get that support across. So just let them know you're there for them. Even if we can't disabuse you of the notion that they knew what they were getting into, just express support and maybe refrain from saying that. All right, let's move on to the second one. This is also a doozy. It must be hard for their mom. The first time I heard this one was when one of my sons was having a health episode. He's special needs and he had to go into the hospital. And a really close friend of mine, just kind of offhand when I was telling her what was going on, said, wow, this must all be so hard for his mom. Just no. Girl, your friend is the stepmom, not the mom. It doesn't mean you can't sympathize with what the whole family is going through, or even what the biological mom is feeling. But first, and I'm speaking to the friends of stepmoms and the family of stepmoms, please recognize your friend, the stepmom. That child is her family too. She is going to go through a roller coaster of emotions when her stepchildren are having a tough time. Her challenges may be very different. They are going to be very different than a biological mother's, but it doesn't mean they're any less real or any less serious or that she's any less upset. And she really needs to be able to lean on her loyal friends and family. So stepmom, how do you respond to something like this? Well, I had to really hold my tongue on this one. So instead of saying what I wanted to say, I said, you know what? It's been really hard for all of us. We are all going through a lot right now. And I left it at that. And for you stepmom friends and family, let's just not say this one. How about that? But if you are going to say anything like that, how about something like, wow, what a difficult situation for everybody. Can I do anything for you or your family? That's going to come across as much more sympathetic, I can promise you. So, all right, moving on. The next one is, you got an instant family. All right, this is really common for people to say to stepmoms, and it is usually meant with kindness, and it's usually said with excitement. And I think that I have even said it myself. But it really oversimplifies the stepmom experience. Yeah, you definitely got an instant family. But that doesn't mean it's an instant happy family. It is much more than meets the eye. You may not know that stepfamilies take an average of 7 years to fully bond as their own family unit. Yes, you heard me right. 7 years. And during that time, an instant family can mean instant challenges, adjusting and bonding and dealing with conflict, among lots of other ups and downs of just life and depending on the ages of the kids. It's not all bad. I mean, not by any means. And most stepmoms love the heck out of their instant families. I know that I do. But instant family is kind of like what I call the great expectation that stepmoms have that generally disappoints them. And so when people say that, if you're in the stage where you're kind of realizing that your instant family isn't so instant awesome, it can really remind you of that fact. So how do you respond to something like that? How about something like, yeah, I definitely got some instant family members, and I am really loving getting to know them. Look, you don't have to expose all your warts when you respond to some of these. It's not like you need to give religion to everybody that says something that's slightly offensive. And you don't want to make your friends and family feel like they have to step on toes when they're around you and worry about what they're going to say, that everything's going to offend you. But if you can soften your responses to make your point, you'll feel better and you'll get your point across. And for your friends and family, I think that maybe you could say something like, instant family, huh? That must be really challenging, but I bet it's fun. Again, that's just sort of softening up, recognizing the upside of these new family members that, your stepmom has gotten, but also recognizing that maybe it's not, exactly what she bargained for. Okay, so this next one is one that I'm going to say it and you're going to say, I cannot believe people actually say it, but yes, they do. This one is, It's your fault things aren't working. And yes, people do actually say that. Now, your friends and family are not going to be so blunt. Something like this may also come out like, are you sure you've done everything you can? The first time I heard this was actually from one of my readers over on thiscustomlife.com. And I usually love hearing from my readers, but I received a comment once that I could not believe. The woman wrote, "What a joke. If stepfamily doesn't work, it's stepmom's fault. It's 2020, not 1950. I could not believe it. I was totally caught off guard. Not because it was negative. I mean, everybody's got a right to their own opinion. And honestly, not everybody has to be interested in what I say or what I'm offering. That's fine. It was the blanket statement that if a stepfamily doesn't work, it's the stepmom's fault. Wowzer. Talk about reinforcing negative stereotypes. I mean, the reader was right on one count. It is 2020, not 1950. Stepmoms nowadays, just like biological moms, and all women really, have much more control over their lives. We are empowered to establish boundaries, to take a step back when we need to, and to stand up for ourselves. And we are not required to suffer in silence, to put ourselves last, or to accept being second place in our partner's eyes. Your partner's family existed and was broken before you came along. It is not your duty to put it back together. And you should not be made to feel unnecessary blame or responsibility. What is your duty is to offer the best of yourself and to be there for your partner and your stepchildren, to set up your own family structure, make it a safe environment, and work hard to make it function. And no matter what anyone thinks of you, I know you're doing your best to make that work. So if somebody says that to you, how about a response kind of like, look, things are a little more complicated than they might seem. I'm not going to get into it all, but trust me when I tell you that we are all doing our best, and I could really use your support. For friends and family of stepmoms, for gosh darn sake, please do not blame your stepmom loved one for what might be going badly in her life right now. She is stressed out enough already. How about something simple and supportive like, I know being a stepmom must be really hard. How can I support you? Does that make sense? And you're picking up on a common theme here, friends and family. Your stepmom in your life needs support. They need your support. All right, so moving on to the next one. They're not your kids. Okay, this one kills me, I have to just say. Because first of all, duh, we know we didn't give birth to our stepkids. And we are well aware that we probably wouldn't even know the kids if it weren't for who we fell in love with. This is a well-intentioned statement, okay? But it can feel a little dismissive. When we've had problems with our kids, I've heard on more than one occasion from very well-intentioned friends, well, at least they're not your kids, except they're my family. Did I give birth to them? No. But I love them and I care for them. And for me, and for many other childless stepmoms, they're the only kids that I'm going to have. I did not give birth to them, but they are my family. And you know what, stepmom? You know just as well as I do that we know we're not the biological parent. And there are certain decisions and situations that can and should only be handled by the biological parents. Our role is to support our partner in their parenting. And, most of us stepmoms understand that we don't need to be front and center in the parenting role, but that support is really important and that we have a strong role to play in our families. And when there is shared custody and the children are living in our house, we are going to be really involved in co-parenting. And when we're in the thick of it, those kids sure feel very real. So how do you respond to something like this? How about something like, well, I may not have given birth to them, but they are my family. Or honestly, that can be hard to pull off without sounding a little defensive. You could say something just very simple like, well, they're my family. And friends and family of stepmoms, I know that you're being supportive when you say this, but instead of saying something like that, maybe go with something like, I really admire you for jumping into what must be a really difficult dynamic sometimes. That'll let them know that you support them without sounding dismissive. So moving on to the next one. I'm sure, stepmom, that you have heard this. Just let your partner handle it. Why do you need to be involved? This is kind of an extension of they're not your kids. And it's also usually really well-intentioned. But the implication is still very much that because you didn't give birth to these kids, that you don't have an interest in keeping them safe, healthy, and happy, or that you shouldn't be involved in co-parenting. And nothing could be further from the truth. Girl, I know you care deeply about what happens to these kids and how they're developing, and I know you want to be involved. And that involvement looks really different in every family and at every stage of step parenting. But I know you're doing your darndest to figure out the right level of involvement. You might have a super active role, which is kind of how I would describe mine over the years, like attending all the school functions and sporting events and talking to teachers and doctors and all that kind of stuff. Or you might be more of the supportive spouse who counsels your partner when they're doing most of the interactions. Whatever your role looks like, you're going to be involved in a lot of things that affect the kids. And you want to be all in, but you don't want to overstep. And it's a fine line and it's really hard to navigate. I totally got it. So when someone says this to you, don't feel like you need to justify your role, because you don't. Say something like, well, parenting is complicated and these decisions affect the whole family, so I'm usually involved. And friends and family, again, try something a little more understanding. If you're really worried about how much your loved one is doing or involved in with her step family, how about saying something like, gosh, this role has been a lot for you to take on. Do you want to talk about it? Again, just be there for them. Let them bounce things off of you. Maybe let them know that you're not sure what the right thing to say is, but that you're there for them. So moving on. The next one is, you'd understand if you had your own kids. This one kills me. I'm a stepmom without biological kids. So my response to this is usually some effort to water down the snarky comeback that I really want to give. And this one's been hard for me. And it has in the past ended up to be a little bit more of a polite version of, well, biological kids weren't in the cards for me, so I guess I just don't understand. That's probably not the right way to respond, but please know that I struggle with this stuff too. This is another one that's usually really well-intentioned. It also sometimes sounds like if you'd given birth, you'd understand. Yes, stepmoms who then go on to have their own biological kids often change their perspective on any number of issues. But to say a stepmom can't understand because she hasn't had her own children, it's just condescending. And again, it's not intentional. It just is. Are there certain things we haven't been through? Sure. Childless stepmoms haven't experienced childbirth. We don't and will never have the cellular connection to children that biological moms do, and we never will. But it doesn't mean we don't form different, very close connections with our stepchildren, and it doesn't mean we can't empathize about other issues around motherhood. And it discounts any possible heartbreak that we ourselves may have experienced over not being able to have our own children, and that is real. So if someone says this to you, how about responding with, yeah, there are probably things that are hard to understand unless you've given birth, but I do have a really special relationship with my stepkids. And for friends and family of stepmoms, this is one that I would say, how about just don't? Just don't tell them that they can't understand. Instead, maybe try something a bit more empathetic, like, it must have been quite a transition to go from single to married with children. You are my heroine. I know that's maybe a little extreme, but again, stepmoms really need your support. They really need your understanding, and they don't want to feel like you're trying to exclude them from motherhood. All right, moving on to the next one. At least you get a break. Yeah, this is a true statement. Unless your spouse has full custody of your stepchildren, you will get a, quote, break during the times that they go back to their mom's house. I'm not going to lie. Our kid-free weeks can be a nice break, for sure, especially if there's been a lot of conflict going on. There have definitely been days when my husband and I have looked at each other when the kids have gone and exhaled with relief. But depending on the kids' ages, it's not always a break. You're still dealing with the biological mom, especially if she's high conflict. We happen to have a special needs child, so we have regular calls with various members of his team, and there's never really a break from that. And then there's the fact that, yes, it's a break, but that means you don't see the kids. You're missing out on what happens at the other house. And if you don't have a lot of communication with the ex, you really may not know what's going on. So Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have a break and it's great to have the alone time with your spouse. But I'll tell you, for us, most of the times we miss the kids when they're not around. And I know our house feels a little lonely and kind of quiet when it's just me and Craig. We like it, but it's always weird to go from seeing the kids all day, every day, to not knowing how their day's going or what they're up to. And I have to remind myself sometimes that before his divorce, Craig never got a break from his kids. And even after all this time, it is hard for him to just see them half the time. And I know he really misses them. And I should also mention that just because we have the kids less than full time does not mean our job is magically easier. We deal with a whole host of dynamics that are not there for traditional marriages or parenting. I'm not saying that I don't value the alone time with my husband that comes along with these breaks. I definitely do. And there are times when I don't know how I would cope without them. But it's just not that simple. So I don't know. You could respond with something simple like, well, breaks are overrated. Or you could say something like, breaks are nice, but they're challenging too. I mean, we miss the kids and we hate missing what's going on with them on those weeks. And for stepmom friends and family, how about instead of saying that, say something like, I know you must miss the kids when they're at their mom's house. Maybe you guys could make some plans to enjoy some alone time while they're gone. Something, again, a little understanding and empathetic to where your stepmom loved one is. So the next and last one is also a little bit of a doozy. And it's always said with the best of intentions. And it would just be easier if the kids were with you full time. Friends and family will say this a lot of times if there's like a real high conflict situation between houses. It's usually really well intentioned. They're just saying they respect your parenting, and it's honestly kind of a compliment to you and your partner. And especially if you have been venting to them about the kids' moms and her shenanigans, they're probably a little fired up on your behalf, and they might truly think you're a better parent and that the kids would be better off. But I know that it would absolutely not be easier if you just had the kids full time. Because you know what that means? That would mean they didn't have any kind of relationship with their biological mom. And as tough as things may be with her, kids need both of their parents. And I guarantee that if their biological mom were to magically disappear or run off with someone, there would be a whole host of resulting issues, abandonment, and all kinds of other stuff that your stepkids would have to deal with. So that sure doesn't sound to me like that would be in their best interest. The best and easiest situation is, of course, for the kids to have a low conflict biological mom who can effectively co-parent in a way that shows the kids that they have two households who both love and cherish them. And that is a lovely scenario. But for a lot of step families, and maybe for your step family, that's probably not the reality. But it almost never means that the kids will be better off with one parent out of the picture. Kids need both of their parents. And in a case where parents split up and marry other people, kids just need to know that they have two homes where they are loved and wanted and safe. So when someone says this to you, I think you can acknowledge that you appreciate the good intention behind it, but you could say something like, that's not really the case. Even when things are tough, I know their mom loves them and they do need their mom. And friends and family, how about something like, I'm sorry things are tough right now. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you figure it all out. I know that there are probably a million other well-intentioned things that your friends and family have said or will say or might say to you that will hurt your feelings or make you feel bad about being a stepmom. And I really encourage you to have a conversation with them. You don't want them to feel like they need to walk on eggshells around you, but you do want them to understand your point of view and to understand how they can relate to you and how they can support you. And that, what you really want more than anything else is that support from them. I know that you want to know you're not alone and, have that conversation with your family and friends. Especially if you don't know a ton of other stepmoms that you can relate to, you might not have a lot of people you can talk to. And if that's the case, have that conversation with your family and friends and say, I really need your support. I don't have a lot of people that understand what I'm going through. And I know that you may not be able to fully appreciate, my life as a stepmom, but if you can listen and keep an open heart and open mind, it would mean the world to me. I guarantee if you open up like that to your family and friends, it'll mean something. And I would bet it'll end up with you feeling much more supported and valued and feeling like you have a network of people that you can rely on. And look, I know it is really hard to respond when somebody says one of these awkward things to you, especially if it's someone close to you. It took me a really long time to learn how to hold my tongue and how to give that diplomatic response. And let's be honest, I don't always get that right. I mean, sometimes something will come out of my mouth and I have to just walk it back and say, I'm sorry, I really need a redo on this one. But if you can get to that point where at least most of the time you're giving a diplomatic response and holding your tongue, if you can do that and keep the peace, but at the same time, give your friends and family a new perspective on your experience and maybe, help them increase their empathy towards you and their support for you, you absolutely won't regret it. It was great to talk to you today. Don't forget to head over and subscribe to the Stepmom Diaries so that you don't miss a single episode. That's it for this week. If you've enjoyed our chat, I hope you'll help spread the word. Share this episode with friends and head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review. And don't forget, for more great Stepmom content, visit thiscustomlife.com and follow me on social media. Just search This Custom Life on your favorite platform. Until next time, you keep being you and know that we are in this together. See you here next week.